Hello all my creative friends, it's Sue. I'm back with another video. If you have not followed me before and this is your first time viewing, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by to take a look. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. I appreciate you coming back to see another video. If you like this videos, subscribe, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment. All of it helps me out. If you choose not to, that's totally fine too. I have two Etsy stores, one by the name of SMB Jewelry Designs, which is what this channel is named after, and I also have one called Gallopin' Kitty. They're both fun shops, so if you get a moment to check them out, I will put the links down in the description below. I would really appreciate it. However, let's get into this video. Don't have a lot laying out here right now because I am getting ready to mix up some resin for some new creations. But I thought I would share with you my process before and while I am getting that resin ready. So what I'm showing you here, and let me zoom out just a little bit, are some cups that I typically use. This is a silicone measuring cup, mixing cup. These are a couple smaller silicone cups. And what I've done is I've turned them inside out, everything, and got the little bits of resin as much as I'm able to get off of them. What I do next is I will spray them with a little bit of alcohol. I put some regular isopropyl alcohol into a little spritzer, which is extremely handy to have around to clean up. What I use is 91% isopropyl alcohol. You can get it at Walmart, at your pharmacy, wherever you want. After I've spritzed the alcohol on, I go through and just clean up any sticky bits of resin that might be hanging around that I want to get rid of on the inside of my cup. You'll have stuff on the outside of your cup or whatever, but I get as much of that off as I can with the alcohol. And there's a lot left on my mat here, so I just pick it up. Basically doing the same thing for all of these surfaces. Just giving them a quick rub down to get any of the sticky residue off that might be on there. Same thing with my mixing cup. Just wipe it down very quickly. Turning them inside out makes the process a lot easier because then you're not having to reach your hand inside the cup. And those I've finished wiping down. I'll talk about them again in a second. My mat here, I do the same thing. Wipe it down as much as I can to get like old mica powders off. Anything else that I can pick up that might be on the surface of my mat. And that's basically just cleaning off any dust and debris and other things. I won't throw my napkin away in case I want to use it again to clean up something. What I will do next, especially for my mat, is to take some sort of sticky tape, and it can be any tape of your choice. I'm looking, for my painter's tape here, so I just have some blue painter's tape. I'll tear a strip of it off. This can be wasteful. I'm aware of that. I don't use this unless I absolutely have to because the pieces of resin are too small, but what this will do is if you have little drops of resin that are on your mat after you've made a project and they're just kind of sticking there, and you don't want to spend the time going through and picking all those little pieces off. Those little pieces, since they are on silicone, will come right off with some sticky tape. The tape will pick it up and it'll look something like this when you're all done. I will not use another piece of tape. I generally only do this every, maybe 10 uses of my mat or so, because I'm not really concerned about my mat overall as far as like leftover bits of resin and stuff. This is really to protect my table and to be cleanable. So I'm not really concerned if I don't get everything off of it. What I do want to do is have as clean a work surface as I can, just so I'm not picking up stray pieces of glitter and stray pieces of dust and other debris. So I am going to take these to my sink. I'm going to do a quick wash in warm water and soap to get as much of the surface clean as possible. I'll dry them off and I'll be right back. All right, so my mat is nice and clean. It's nice and shiny. It's as clean as I'm going to get it. Like I said, I'm not worried if there's little bits and pieces left. I'm not mixing stuff on here or picking stuff up and putting it into other projects, so I don't care. These guys are all nice and clean. You want to make sure they're clean and dry before you use them. Resin and water don't mix. This one looks really good. This one still has a little bit of stuff left in it. I don't know if you can see it, but use a tiny little piece of tape. Because like I said, some glitters and mica powders, they love silicone. Love it, love it, love it, love it. And will cling to it until you forcefully evict them. Oh my goodness. So that's what I'm doing here. So that's pretty clean. I'm not concerned about that at all. All right. So now we have everything as clean as we can get it. Our mat is clean. Our little mixing cups are clean. I also have some disposable plastic ones over here if I should need them. I have them at the ready. I have my mixing cup ready. I have my molds clean and ready. And I have a stack always of paper towels, plus my alcohol, should I need it. The only thing that I'm missing at this point is something to mix my resin up with. And I have a lot of these silicone mixing sticks. Sometimes they come with resin when you order them. You can buy them online by themselves. There is some dried resin on here, but I know for the most part it's not going to come off. When I'm mixing, I can pick it off now if I wanted to. I'm not going to take the time to do that. All right, so let's get into the mixing of the resin. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Some important tips to keep in mind when you want to make a resin project and mix up resin if you've never mixed up resin before or if you're experiencing problems with it. I am not perfect. My resin often, I often don't follow my own tips and guidelines, but I'm going to tell you what you should do and what I try to do. So first of all, before you start your project, just make sure you have a clear idea or as clear as you can about how much resin you're actually going to need. I usually plan things out. If I know I'm going to make a few different things, then I try to gauge how much resin I might need for each one of them. Typically for what I'm going to be making today, I think I'm probably going to need somewhere in the vicinity of about, I think I'm going to mix up 80 milliliters of resin. That should be enough to get me through what I want to do. And if I have a little bit left over, I have a project that I always have running to make use of the extra resin because I don't want it to go to waste. So knowing that I'm going to mix up about 80 milliliters, I make sure I know where my 80 milliliters is, and depending on the kind of resin you're using, whether it's 1-to-1 ratio epoxy or 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, make sure you have your calculations handy as to what you're going to need to use out of which of your bottles. Today I'm using this Let's Resin epoxy. It's crystal clear, bubble free. It doesn't, what am I trying to say? It's 1-to-1. That's what I was trying to say. So it's 1-to-1 by weight or volume. So it's equal parts of the hardener and the resin. This is not sponsored. I bought this resin myself. I've been using it. I really enjoy it. It dries very clear. It's a little bit less thick than the resin that I get from Michael's, so it's a little bit easier to work with. Every resin has its own viscosity and its own reason as to what it should be used in. So I do encourage you to do your research to figure out what you might want to use your resin for and what kind of resin would make the most sense to you. So now that I know how much I need, so I would need 40 milliliters of the one part A and another 40 milliliters up to the 80 for the part B. I do have some cups here at the ready to do separate color mixing. I do have some mica powders off to the side that I'll be utilizing. One thing that I haven't gotten yet is a little scoop or something to get my my powders out with. I have this little tiny plastic spoon that came with something, so I'm going to use that because I can't find my little scoop that I would usually use, but this will work fine. I still have my old used piece of paper towel over here to wipe off this spoon and other things if I need it. I've got my mixer. So before we get into it, a couple of other things that you need to be aware of. First of all, protection. So if you don't already wear glasses, eye protection is a good thing to have. I don't usually use it, but I will use a respirator, and I always, always, always wear gloves. You might see videos where I'm not wearing gloves if I'm working with UV resin. If I'm working with a lot of it, I will, but if it's a small amount and I know I'm not going to be really coming in contact with it much because I'm pouring it right into a mold, I may not wear gloves. Working with epoxy resin, I'm almost always going to get it on my hands, and I don't want to if I can avoid it, so you should wear gloves. The gloves that I choose to use are just plain old disposable multi-purpose nitrile gloves. You can get these all over the place. You can get them at stores like Walmart. You can get them at a pharmacy. You can pick them up online. They're readily accessible, but they should be nitrile gloves. Those are the best kind for working with resin. As long as I have my box out, I'm going to grab a couple of my gloves, put them off on the side here so that they're ready to go. I do have my respirator down here, and when I'm mixing it up, I will wear my respirator to mix it. And as long as I'm working with it, I will not be wearing it today just so that you can hear me talk, but typically when I'm mixing this stuff up, I do. Anyway, beyond the safety, which is the gloves, the respirator, and the glasses if you choose to wear them, is also understanding about your resin. So the colder the temperatures are outside or in your home, the thicker your resin will be. For the most part, not every resin, but experience has shown me that most resin will thicken up a little bit if it's cool. The warmer it is, the more liquid it becomes and the easier it is to pour and work with. So if you do find that you're in a cold house and your resin is very thick and takes forever to mix up, it's something I do typically will warm up my resin. So I'll usually put these resin bottles into a bath of warm water, let them sit there until I'm ready to use them. That way they're nice and fluid. Pour them, mix them up. You get fewer bubbles and you get a much better mix of your resin. All right. So I think before mixing tips, that's all I can offer or all I can think of at the moment. If there's something else as I go, I will definitely touch on it. So here we go. Gloves on. Doesn't matter which part you pour first, as long as you understand that you need to pour one and then pour the other. Many times people will pour the resin into two separate containers. So they'll pour their one mixture, their one measure rather, into one cup. They'll get another cup and pour the other resin, the hardener or whatever, into the second cup, and then pour those both cups into one. I don't ever do that. I know why people feel it's a good idea, because it gets a better, they feel like it gets a better mix, and perhaps it does. And I'm certainly not discounting any of those folks that do that. Just because I don't do it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just means that I choose not to do it that way. And the Let's Resin bottles come with a nice little stopper on the top. So besides the cover, you also get a little stopper. So if your resin bottle should tip over, that's going to help prevent any spills. So I put the stopper back in, put the cap back in. Now I've just measured out. You're not going to be able to see this. I'm not going to be able to hold it up. But there is 40 milliliters in this cup. Now I'll do the same with the other bottle. And I'll pour this up to my 80 ml line. And my house is a comfortable temperature today, so my resin is pouring pretty freely, pretty easily. Just put the stopper back in here, if I can get it in without sending it flying, which I'm trying not to do. Goodness. I'm going to use my other hand that doesn't have resin all over it to put the cover back on here. And I'll put these off to the side. I do have a little bit of resin on my fingers, on my glove. So just using that little bit of spray alcohol, sprayed it onto my glove. Just wipe it off quickly. That'll prevent your gloves from being sticky and having resin on them. So when you go to touch something else, I don't care if there's resin on my gloves. The thing that's important here for me is that I'm not touching other things and getting resin all over them. That's what I'm trying to avoid. And you should be able to see, I'm hoping, that there's already very few bubbles in there. The key to keeping as few bubbles as possible, like I said, is to have the resin be as thin as you can get it and mixing slowly. And if your bottle says that you should mix it for 3 minutes, you should mix it for 3 minutes. But you don't want to be mixing it like you're whisking a cake. You want to mix it slowly. Try to avoid taking your mixer in and out and in and out so you're not introducing more air, because every time you pull this out and then you shove it back in, more air bubbles are going to be trapped in there. So just avoid doing that. I'm always scraping the sides of my cup, running my mixer back and forth across the bottom. Because if you remember, we poured one of the parts into the bottom and one of the other part that was left onto the top of that resin. So there's going to be a little bit of a layer there. And you want to make sure you scrape it off the bottom and off the sides, just like you're mixing a cake. I scraped off my stirrer because I'm sure that there's parts of resin still stuck on there from the 2 different levels of resin I had, so I just scraped it off to get it more incorporated. Again, just running my spatula or my stirring stick around the outside, the outer perimeter of my mixing cup. And again, just mixing slowly. And I never set a timer to tell me that I've mixed it for 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 1 minute, whatever the bottle says to mix it. I will typically mix it until I no longer see streaks in my resin. I hope that's picking up on camera. I'm not sure if it is, but when you look in your resin, you will see streaks that look like, well, I don't know how to describe them. They look like streaks. And if you could still see streaks swirling around on the top of your resin as you're mixing, then your resin is still not mixed. You want to stir until you can't see those streaks anymore. And for a little bit here, I thought I was getting close, but now that I'm moving my stirrer around a little bit more and going around the outer edge, I'm still seeing streaks in there. So I'm just going to continue to mix this off camera until it's fully incorporated, because you don't need to sit here and watch me painfully mix for 3 minutes. Okay, come to the end of my mixing. I'm no longer seeing any streaks when I move my stick around in here, even when I scrape the sides. I'm not seeing any streaks. So usually what I will do next is scrape off my stirring stick, get it out of my resin. Unless I plan to use the whole thing of resin to pour into something, then I will leave it in there. But when I took this out, I made a mess. So I'm just scraping it all back in there. And I'll just put my stick off to the side. Still staying everything on my silicone mat so that I don't have anything getting stuck to my work table as much as I can avoid it. I don't know what happened to the napkin that I was just using. Seems to have disappeared. I might have thrown it away without really intending to. Anyway, I just sprayed my finger a little bit with my alcohol because I did get quite a bit of resin on my one finger. So cleaning my gloves off again because I'm going to be picking up bottles of mica and other things in my molds, and I just don't want resin getting all over everything. And I did get some alcohol on my mat here, so since I did that, I'm just going to wipe off any resin that did spill out of my cup and off the side here. Again, this is all just to keep things clean, so you're not transferring resin onto everything that you touch. All right. Well, that does it for mixing. I hope that was helpful. I hope I gave you some pointers that you might find useful. In addition, one last thing I thought of just now is I will put my resin that's mixed off to the side just for a little bit and let it release any air bubbles that might be in there to get it as clear as possible, and then I'm ready to go. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment if you'd like to see something else, or if you have a question, be happy to answer as much as I can. Have a great, wonderful day or night, wherever you are, whenever you are. Stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Bye.